A developing situation in Canada is raising serious questions, not just about public safety, but about how far a protest can go before it crosses the line. Let's take a look at it. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Xplained, brought to you by NewsX, and I'm Megha Sharma. Today we delve into the fact that pro-Khalistan groups have called for rallies outside Hindu temples in cities like Brampton, in Triveni Mandir in Greater Toronto, and Lakshmi Narayan Mandir in Surrey, British Columbia area. And these are not just any locations. These are places of worship, spaces that are meant to be safe, apolitical and protected. The concern is simple and serious. When a political protest is deliberately positioned outside a religious site, is it still just a protest, or does it become intimidation? At the center of this is the planned mobilization by groups linked to the Khalistan movement, including organizations like Sikhs for Justice. These groups have in the past organized referendums and demonstrations advocating for a separate Sikh homeland. But what is different this time is the location and the messaging. Calling for rallies specifically outside Hindu temples has triggered alarm within the Hindu community in Canada, who see this not as expression but as targeting. And this concern isn't coming out of nowhere. Over the past few years, there have been a pattern. Hindu temples across Canada have been vandalized, walls defaced with anti-India and pro-Khalistan graffiti. In some cases, slogans like "Go Back India" have been reported. This concern is also rooted in what has already happened. Over the past few years, several Hindu temples across Canada have been targeted with vandalism, including graffiti and pro-Khalistani slogans in cities like Brampton, Mississauga and Windsor. In some cases, walls were defaced with messages perceived as anti-India, and there have also been reports of confrontations and aggressive demonstrations outside temple premises. These repeated incidents have created an atmosphere of unease, which is why the latest call for rallies outside temples is being viewed with heightened concern. There have even been instances of physical confrontations outside the temples. So when a rally is now being planned at these exact locations, it's being seen in the context of what has already happened, not in isolation. That's why Hindu organizations and temple authorities have decided to act early. They wrote to the Canadian authorities raising concerns about safety, about potential escalation, and about the possibility of violence. The message was clear. This is not just about disagreement, this is about security. And to its credit, law enforcement has responded. Police in regions like Peel and Surrey have acknowledged the concerns. Meetings have been held with temple representatives. Assurances have been given that there will be a visible security presence. In some cases, restrictions have also been discussed, including maintaining distance between the protesters and places of worship and ensuring that any demonstrations remain peaceful and within legal limits. But even with these assurances, one big question remains. Will the rally actually be stopped? Because as of now, the protests themselves have not been banned, and that brings us to the core dilemma that Canada is facing. On one hand, there is the right to free speech and peaceful protest, a fundamental democratic value. On the other, there is the responsibility to ensure that no community feels threatened, especially in spaces that are meant to be safe. So where does one draw the line? Because this is not just a legal question, it's a political one, and increasingly it's becoming a diplomatic one as well. The Khalistan movement itself is not new. It dates back decades, rooted in the demand for a separate Sikh state. Today, much of its visible activity is based in diaspora communities, particularly in countries like Canada, United Kingdom and Australia. But it's important to note here, not all Sikhs support this movement. In fact, many within the Sikh community have openly distanced themselves from it. So what we are seeing is not a community movement, but the actions of specific groups within it. However, the impact of those actions is much wider, because incidents like these have already begun to strain relations between India and Canada. Over the past year, tensions between the two countries have escalated sharply over the issue of Khalistani extremism and related allegations. Diplomatic ties have been tested, statements have been exchanged, and now developments like these rallies risk adding yet another layer to an already sensitive situation. Which brings us to the role of the Canadian government led by Mark Carney. The government has repeatedly stated that it is committed to protecting all communities, that it takes threats seriously. that law and order will be maintained. But this is where those assurances are being put to test. Because when a potentially sensitive rally is planned outside a religious site after a history of vandalism and tensions, words are no longer enough. The question is not what has been promised. The question is what will actually be done on the ground. Will authorities enforce strict boundaries? Will they prevent any form of intimidation? Or will they allow the protests to go ahead in the name of free speech, even if it risks escalating tensions? And that's where this story becomes bigger than just one rally, because it touches on a much larger issue: how democracies handle competing rights. The right to protest versus the right to feel safe. The right to express versus the responsibility to not provoke. In theory, both can coexist, but in practice, especially in a charged environment like this, that balance becomes extremely difficult to maintain. As the day of the rally approaches, security is expected to be tightened. Police presence will likely be increased, barriers may be put in place. But even then, the risk does not completely disappear. All it takes is one spark, one confrontation for this situation to escalate. And that's exactly what communities on the ground are worried about. Because for them, this is not just a political issue, it's personal. It's about whether they can visit a temple without fear, whether their place of worship remains a place of peace or becomes a site of protest and tensions.